Millionaire CO boss called her a nurse with no future. Years later she held his son's life in her hands. Dr. Michelle Harris stared down at the small chest before her, her gloved hands steady despite the chaos around her. The 8-year-old boy's heart lay exposed, beating frantically as monitors screamed warnings throughout the operating room. His pressure's dropping fast, her resident called out, panic creeping into his voice. Dr. Harris, should we call for backup? Michelle's jaw tightened as she studied the monitors. No. I can handle this. But it wasn't the complexity of the surgery that made her pause. It was the name on the chart. Hartwell. The same man who had looked her in the eye 5 years ago and declared she was just a nurse with no future in real medicine, was now sitting in the waiting room, praying she could save what mattered most to him. Welcome back to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where love, redemption, and second chances collide in the most unexpected ways. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because stories like this don't come around often. And if this story moves you the way I know it will, show some love with a like. Let's begin. Michelle Harris moved through the trauma unit at St. Catherine's Hospital with the precision of someone who had mastered the art of saving lives. At 32, she commanded respect from doctors twice her age, not because of her title, but because of her uncanny ability to predict when patients were about to crash. Code Blue Trauma Bay 4. The intercom crackled. Michelle was already running, her tablet in hand displaying data that told a story others couldn't read. The patient was a 50-year-old accountant who had seemed stable just minutes before. But Michelle's monitoring system had been tracking 17 different variables, and the patterns were unmistakable. When did his respiratory rate start fluctuating? She asked the attending physician as they worked to stabilize the patient. Dr. Martinez looked puzzled. It didn't. His breathing has been normal all morning. Michelle showed him her tablet screen. Look at these micro-variations. His respiratory pattern changed 37 minutes ago. My algorithm flagged it as a precursor to cardiac distress. The resuscitation was successful, and as the patient stabilized, Dr. Martinez shook his head in amazement. How many times has that system of yours been right? Every single time, Michelle replied, updating her database. 2,047 cases. 0 false predictions. Her algorithm wasn't just a monitoring system, it was 5 years of her life distilled into code. Every late night spent analyzing data, every pattern she'd recognized in dying patients, every subtle sign that traditional equipment missed. She had taught machines to see what human eyes couldn't detect, to hear the whispers of failing hearts before they screamed. The breakthrough had come during a case that haunted her dreams. 8-year-old Williams had been brought in after a playground accident, conscious and talking, his vital signs perfectly normal. But something felt wrong to Michelle, an instinct she couldn't explain. Dr. Chin, I think we should keep him for observation, she had suggested. Based on what? The kid's fine, Michelle. His parents want to take him home. Michelle had trusted her gut, convincing the family to stay just a few more hours. At 11:30 p.m., Marcus went into sudden cardiac arrest due to an undiagnosed congenital defect. Because they were prepared, they saved his life. That night, Michelle realized her intuition wasn't magic. It was pattern recognition. She began documenting every subtle change she noticed in patients, every micro-expression of distress, every barely perceptible shift in breathing or skin tone. Slowly, she built an algorithm that could replicate her instincts. You need to get this technology into every hospital in the country, Dr. Patricia Vance, her mentor, had told her repeatedly. This could save thousands of lives. Michelle knew Dr. Vance was right, but she also understood the reality of her situation. As a trauma nurse, she had credibility in the emergency room but little influence in corporate boardrooms. She needed a partner who could see beyond her title to the revolutionary potential of her work. MedTech Solutions dominated the cardiac monitoring industry. Their systems were installed in hospitals nationwide, and their CEO, James Hartwell, was known for his ability to identify breakthrough technologies. If anyone could recognize the value of her innovation, it would be him. Her small apartment had become a research laboratory. Medical journals covered every surface, programming manuals stacked beside statistical analyses. The MCAT books she'd bought years ago gathered dust on her shelf, dreams postponed for the immediate reality of perfecting her life-saving algorithm. Michelle's savings account showed $23,847, money she'd carefully accumulated through overtime shifts and careful budgeting. It was supposed to buy her first house, a symbol of stability and success. But she had bigger dreams now. This algorithm could prevent the kind of sudden losses that devastated families, The unexpected cardiac events that stole parents from children and spouses from each other. The case that convinced her to seek outside backing involved Elena Rodriguez, a 42-year-old nurse from another department. Elena had come to the emergency room complaining of mild chest discomfort, but her EKG was normal, her blood work unremarkable. "I think she should go home," the resident had suggested. "Probably just stress." But Michelle's algorithm was screaming warnings. The pattern of Elena's vital signs matched profiles that preceded major cardiac events. Michelle insisted on keeping her for observation, despite the normal test results. 4 hours later, Elena suffered a massive heart attack. Because Michelle had recognized the early warning signs, the response was immediate and Elena survived. She returned to work 6 weeks later, forever grateful to the nurse who had seen danger where others saw nothing. "How do you do it?" Elena had asked during her recovery. "How do you see things that don't show up on any test?" Michelle had smiled, pulling up her algorithm's interface. "The human body tells us everything we need to know. We just have to learn how to listen." That conversation crystallized Michelle's mission. Her algorithm wasn't just about predicting cardiac events, it was about giving every patient the same level of intuitive care she provided. It was about democratizing the kind of clinical insight that usually took decades to develop. The preparation for her meeting with Hartwell consumed every free moment. Michelle organized 5 years of research into compelling presentations, practiced her pitch until she could deliver it flawlessly, and documented case after case where early intervention had saved lives. The data was undeniable, a 94% accuracy rate in predicting cardiac events, with documented proof that her system could detect problems up to 40 minutes before traditional monitors. "Remember, Michelle," Dr. Vance had cautioned, "the medical device industry is complicated. There are regulatory hurdles, patent issues, manufacturing costs. Don't be discouraged if it takes time to find the right partner." But Michelle wasn't thinking about obstacles. She was thinking about Williams, now a healthy 10-year-old who played soccer every weekend. Her nursing background had taught her to see patients as complete human beings, not just collections of symptoms. Every variable in her algorithm represented real people whose hearts had taught her to recognize the subtle language of cardiac distress. Her experience wasn't a limitation, it was her secret weapon. The gleaming towers of medtech solutions pierced the morning sky like steel monuments to medical innovation. Michelle stepped through the revolving glass doors, her research folder clutched against her chest, containing 5 years of work that could revolutionize cardiac care. "Dr. Harris?" A perfectly groomed assistant approached. "Mr. Hartwell will see you now." Michelle followed her through corridors lined with photographs of cutting-edge medical devices, each one representing millions in revenue and countless lives improved. This was exactly where her algorithm belonged, in a company with the resources and reach to implement it globally. The boardroom doors opened to reveal a space designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while a massive mahogany table dominated the center. At its head sat James Hartwell, reviewing reports with the focused intensity of someone accustomed to making decisions worth millions. At 32, Hartwell commanded attention without effort. His steel-gray eyes moved across financial projections with calculating precision, his Mont Blanc pen tapping against his Rolex in a rhythm that suggested impatience. Everything about him radiated the confidence of a man who had built a billion-dollar empire through ruthless efficiency. "Mr. Hartwell, thank you for seeing me," Michelle said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had spent countless nights making life-or-death decisions. He glanced up briefly, his gaze taking in her hospital ID badge and scrubs with barely concealed dismissal. "You have 10 minutes? My assistant mentioned something about a monitoring system?" Michelle opened her folder, revealing charts that represented thousands of hours of research. "I've developed a predictive algorithm that analyzes 17 different patient variables simultaneously. It can detect cardiac arrest up to 40 minutes before traditional monitors show any abnormalities." "Interesting." His tone suggested otherwise. The pen continued its rhythmic tapping. "And you are?" "Michelle Harris, trauma nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. I've been developing the system for 5 years, using data from over 2,000 patients." "A nurse." The words fell between them like a verdict. Hartwell leaned back in his leather chair, his expression shifting from mild interest to barely concealed condescension. "Ms. Harris, I appreciate your enthusiasm. But medical innovation requires understanding of complex physiological systems, regulatory processes, market dynamics. These aren't concepts you'd encounter in your line of work." Michelle's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. With respect, sir, I've monitored more dying patients than most doctors see in their entire careers. This algorithm has correctly predicted every cardiac event in my test group. She opened her folder wider, revealing detailed case studies and statistical analyses. Last month alone, my system prevented 6 cardiac arrests by providing early warning. Maria Santos, a 38-year-old teacher. Ms. Harris. Hartwell's interruption was sharp, final. He closed her folder without examining a single page of data. Here's some free advice. You're a nurse with no future in real medicine. Stick to taking temperatures and changing bedpans. Leave innovation to people who actually understand it. The dismissal landed with devastating precision. Michelle had prepared for skepticism, for requests for additional data, for concerns about implementation costs. She hadn't prepared for contempt. Sir, if you'd just examine the research. Security will escort you out. Hartwell was already reaching for his phone, his attention returning to his quarterly reports as if she had never existed. Good luck with your nursing career. The security guard's arrival was swift and professional. Ma'am, if you'd please come with me. Michelle walked through the lobby in stunned silence, her life's work reduced to papers clutched against her chest. The marble floors that had seemed impressive an hour ago now felt cold and unforgiving. Every clicking heel echoed Hartwell's words, no future in real medicine. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt endless. Michelle stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors, seeing not the accomplished trauma nurse who had saved countless lives, but the dismissed woman Hartwell had reduced her to. 5 years of research, 2,000 documented cases, a 94% accuracy rate, none of it had mattered to him. In her car, Michelle sat motionless for 20 minutes, processing what had just occurred. She had expected a business negotiation, perhaps concerns about patents or manufacturing costs. Instead, she had encountered something far more devastating, the assumption that her background disqualified her from meaningful contribution to medicine. The drive home passed in a blur of traffic and self-doubt. Michelle found herself questioning everything, her research methodology, her presentation skills, even her right to dream beyond the boundaries others had set for her. Hartwell's words replayed in her mind with cruel persistence. Stick to taking temperatures and changing bedpans. That evening, Michelle sat in her small apartment staring at the MCAT preparation books she had purchased years earlier but never opened. They represented a path she had always considered too ambitious, too expensive, too late to pursue. But Hartwell's rejection had crystallized something inside her, a determination she hadn't known existed. Her laptop screen glowed as she researched medical schools, admission requirements and financial aid options. The numbers were daunting. 4 years of medical school, then residency, then fellowship. She would be 40 before practicing independently, carrying debt that would follow her for decades. Dr. Patricia Vance called as Michelle was calculating loan amounts. How did the meeting go? Her mentor asked. Michelle's voice was steady, but Patricia could hear the underlying steel. He rejected the proposal without reading it. Told me I had no future in real medicine. Michelle, I'm so sorry. But you can't let one person's narrow-mindedness. He's right about one thing, Michelle interrupted. I don't have a future in real medicine as he understands it. But maybe real medicine is something bigger than he imagines. The silence on the other end of the line stretched before Patricia spoke again. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about medical school. Michelle, you're 32 years old with a mortgage and student loans from nursing school. Medical school is 4 years, then residency, then fellowship. You'll be 40 before you're practicing independently. Michelle looked at her savings account balance on her laptop screen. $23,847. Money that was supposed to buy her first house, her symbol of stability and success. Then I'll be a 40-year-old doctor instead of a 40-year-old nurse. The decision crystallized in that moment, born from humiliation but powered by something far stronger, the absolute certainty that she had more to offer medicine than James Hartwell could ever comprehend. Her algorithm would have to wait. But the knowledge she would gain, the skills she would develop, the authority she would earn, those would make her impossible to dismiss. When she returned to the world of medical innovation, it would be as someone no one could reduce to their preconceptions. James Hartwell had tried to end her dreams in that boardroom. Instead, he had redirected them towards something far more ambitious than she had ever imagined. Sometimes the most devastating rejections become the most powerful catalysts for transformation. Michelle Harris was about to prove that potential has no expiration date, and that the longest path often leads exactly where you need to be. What would you do if someone told you that your dreams were impossible? Would you accept their limitations or would you find a way to prove them spectacularly wrong? Share your thoughts below. Michelle stared at the MCAT preparation books scattered across her coffee table, their pristine spines mocking years of deferred ambition. The apartment felt smaller somehow, as if Hartwell's words had compressed the very walls around her dreams. But beneath the sting of rejection, something else was stirring, a fierce determination that surprised her with its intensity. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Michelle, honey, how did your big meeting go?" Her mother's voice carried the hopeful excitement of someone who had watched her daughter work tirelessly for 5 years. Michelle closed her eyes, searching for words that wouldn't devastate the woman who had always believed in her potential. "It didn't go as planned, Mom? What happened? Didn't they understand how important your research is?" "He never looked at it. Told me I should stick to taking temperatures and leave innovation to people who actually understand medicine." The silence stretched across the phone line before her mother's voice returned, sharp with indignation. "That man is a fool. Your research could save thousands of lives." "Maybe. But he's right about one thing, I don't have the credentials to make anyone listen." "So what are you going to do?" Michelle looked at the MCAT books, at the medical school website still open on her laptop, at the life she was about to dismantle. "I'm going to get those credentials." "Medical school? Michelle, sweetheart, you're 32. That's a long road. Then I'll be a 40-year-old doctor instead of a 40-year-old nurse who gave up." The MCAT preparation consumed Michelle's final months as a full-time nurse. She studied during breaks, reviewed flashcards between patient rounds, and took practice tests in the hospital library after her shifts ended. Her colleagues watched with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment as she transformed herself from accomplished nurse to determined student. "You're really doing this," observed Dr. Martinez during one of their last shifts together. "Giving up everything to start over." Michelle looked around the trauma unit that had been her professional home for 7 years. "I'm not starting over. I'm building on everything I've learned here." Her final day at St. Catherine's arrived with unexpected emotion. The staff had organized a small farewell gathering, complete with a cake decorated with a stethoscope and the words, "Future Doctor." "You're going to change medicine," Dr. Vance said during her speech. "Not because you're abandoning nursing but because you're taking everything nursing taught you and expanding it." Michelle looked around at the faces of colleagues who had become family, at the trauma bays where she had saved countless lives, at the monitors that had taught her to read the language of failing hearts. This wasn't an ending, it was a transformation. "I'll be back," she promised. Different, but still the same person who believes medicine is about more than just treating disease. It's about seeing the whole patient, understanding that healing happens in the connection between caregiver and patient. As she walked out of St. Catherine's for the last time as a nurse, Michelle carried with her more than just personal belongings. She carried the wisdom of 7 years spent at the intersection of life and death, the confidence that came from making split-second decisions under pressure, and the absolute certainty that her nursing background wasn't something to overcome, it was her secret weapon. The lecture hall at Northwestern Medical School buzzed with nervous energy as 180 first-year students settled into their seats. Michelle surveyed her classmates, fresh-faced 22-year-olds clutching brand-new laptops and designer coffee cups, their conversations peppered with references to gap years in Europe and undergraduate research at prestigious universities. She opened her second-hand anatomy textbook, its margins already filled with notes from her pre-reading. While her classmates had spent the summer relaxing after graduation, Michelle had been working double shifts at a local clinic to pay rent, studying between patients to prepare for the academic onslaught ahead. The first anatomy lab session revealed the stark differences in their backgrounds. While her classmates approached their cadaver with textbook knowledge and theoretical understanding, Michelle saw the human story written in weathered hands and surgical scars. "This patient had multiple cardiac procedures," she observed quietly to her lab partner, Jake, a 23-year-old who had majored in biochemistry at Harvard. "See these adhesions around the pericardium? And the scarring pattern suggests at least 3 interventions." Jake stared at her in amazement. "How can you tell all that?" "I've seen it before. In living patients." Dr. Williams, the anatomy professor, overheard their conversation. "Ms. Harris, would you share your observations with the class?" Michelle found herself at the center of attention, explaining cardiac pathology to students who had never seen a beating heart outside of textbooks. Her nursing experience transformed abstract concepts into vivid reality, making her an unexpected resource for classmates struggling with clinical correlation. But her advantages came with costs that her younger peers couldn't comprehend. While they gathered at expensive coffee shops for study groups, Michelle reviewed flashcards on the bus ride to her part-time job at a neighborhood clinic. While they attended social events and networking dinners, she worked weekend shifts to pay for groceries and textbooks. Her third year brought clinical rotations that tested every aspect of her preparation. Surgery required standing for 12-hour procedures, internal medicine demanded encyclopedic knowledge of drug interactions, and emergency medicine recreated the high-pressure environment she had left behind at St. Catherine's. But it was during her pediatric surgery rotation that Michelle found her calling. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery, was a legend. A woman who had broken barriers in a male-dominated field and whose reputation for handling impossible cases was unmatched. Surgery is like jazz, Dr. Vasquez told her residents during their first meeting. You practice scales until they're muscle memory, then you improvise when the music changes. The best surgeons know when to follow the plan and when to trust their instincts. Michelle understood immediately. Her nursing background had taught her to read patients' bodies like musical scores, to recognize the subtle rhythms that indicated when something was wrong. Surgery would give her the tools to act on those instincts. The first time she observed Dr. Vasquez operate, Michelle watched in awe as the surgeon's hands moved with balletic precision through a child's chest cavity. The heart, no bigger than a walnut, beat frantically as Dr. Vasquez repaired a defect that would have been fatal without intervention. "What do you see?" Dr. Vasquez asked Michelle during the procedure. "I see a child who will grow up to play soccer because of what you're doing right now." Dr. Vasquez smiled behind her surgical mask. "That's exactly right. We're not just fixing hearts, we're giving children their futures back." As her fourth year approached, Michelle had transformed from the dismissed nurse who had been escorted from MedTech Solutions into a medical student whose professors competed to have her join their residency programs. Her grades placed her in the top 10% of her class, but more importantly, her clinical skills had earned the respect of attending physicians who had initially questioned her unconventional background. The pediatric cardiac surgery unit at Children's Memorial Hospital hummed with controlled intensity. Michelle stepped through the doors as a fourth-year medical student, but the environment felt like a homecoming. The delicate balance of cutting-edge technology and compassionate care reminded her why she had endured 4 years of sacrifice to reach this moment. Dr. Elena Vasquez commanded the unit with quiet authority. At 52, she had performed over 3,000 pediatric cardiac surgeries, each one a testament to her belief that every child deserved a chance at a normal life. Her reputation extended far beyond the hospital walls. She was the surgeon other surgeons called when cases seemed impossible. Their first case was Tommy Chin, a 6-year-old boy born with tetralogy of Fallot, a complex congenital heart defect that left him blue-tinged and breathless after minimal exertion. His parents sat in the consultation room, their faces etched with the particular exhaustion that came from watching their child struggle with basic activities other children took for granted. "What are you drawing, Tommy?" Michelle asked, kneeling beside his chair. "That's me when my heart gets fixed," he replied matter-of-factly. "I'm going to run really fast and not get tired." Tommy's surgery took place the following week. Michelle scrubbed in as an observer, watching Dr. Vasquez work with balletic precision on a heart no bigger than a plum. The defect required rerouting blood flow and patching holes between chambers, intricate work that demanded both technical excellence and artistic vision. Michelle understood immediately. Her nursing background had taught her to read patients' bodies like musical scores, to recognize when something felt wrong even when monitors showed normal readings. Surgery would give her the tools to act on those instincts. "The fact that you understand the weight of that responsibility tells me you're exactly the kind of person who should be carrying it. These children need surgeons who see them as they are, not just as surgical cases." Dr. Vasquez said, smiling. Match day arrived with the weight of 4 years of sacrifice hanging in the balance. Michelle sat in the auditorium with her medical school classmates, each holding an envelope that would determine their professional future. Her hands remained steady, the same hands that had once been dismissed as capable of nothing more than taking temperatures. "Congratulations, Dr. Harris," Sarah whispered as Michelle opened her envelope. "Pediatric cardiac surgery at Children's Memorial. You did it." Michelle stared at the letter, reading the words that transformed her from medical student to surgical resident. Dr. Elena Vasquez had fought for her acceptance into the program, recognizing something in Michelle that transcended traditional metrics of surgical potential. The transition from student to resident was jarring. Michelle's first day in the pediatric cardiac surgery program began at 4:30 a.m. with pre-rounds, reviewing the status of 12 postoperative patients before the attending physicians arrived. Her fellow residents were younger, most having completed their medical training without the detours that had shaped Michelle's unconventional path. "You're the nurse, right?" asked Dr. Kevin Park, a second-year resident whose confidence bordered on arrogance. Interesting career change. Michelle's response was measured, professional. "I'm Dr. Harris, a first-year resident. And yes, my nursing background gives me perspectives that complement surgical training." Dr. Vasquez established the program's philosophy during their first team meeting. Excellence in pediatric cardiac surgery requires more than technical skill. You must understand that every child on our service is someone's entire world. Their parents have entrusted us with their most precious possession. The learning curve was steep. Michelle's days stretched from dawn to well past midnight, studying surgical techniques, mastering anatomy that was measured in millimeters, and learning to make decisions where hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. Her nursing experience proved invaluable in ways she hadn't anticipated. During her third week, Michelle was assisting Dr. Vasquez on a complex arterial switch operation for a newborn with transposition of the great arteries. The baby's heart was no larger than a walnut, its vessels thinner than sewing thread. As Dr. Vasquez worked to reconnect the major arteries, the infant's blood pressure began dropping. "Pressure's falling," announced the anesthesiologist. "Should we increase vasopressor support?" Michelle studied the monitors, but more importantly she observed the baby's skin tone and breathing patterns. Her nursing instincts recognized something the machines hadn't detected yet. "Dr. Vasquez, I think there might be air in the coronary circulation," Michelle suggested quietly. "The skin mottling pattern suggests compromised cardiac perfusion." Dr. Vasquez paused her work, considering Michelle's observation. "Show me what you're seeing." Michelle pointed to subtle changes in the infant's coloration that indicated inadequate blood flow to the heart muscle itself. Dr. Vasquez immediately began de-airing the coronary arteries, a technique that required delicate manipulation of the tiny vessels. Within minutes, the baby's pressure stabilized and color improved. The surgery continued successfully, and the infant recovered without complications. "How did you recognize that?" Dr. Vasquez asked during their post-operative debrief. "The monitors showed normal coronary flow. I learned to read patients' bodies before I learned to read monitors," Michelle explained. "Sometimes the most important information comes from observation, not instrumentation." Dr. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. "That kind of clinical intuition is what separates good surgeons from exceptional ones. Your nursing background isn't something you need to overcome, it's your greatest asset." Word of Michelle's diagnostic insights spread through the department. Attending physicians began seeking her input during complex cases, recognizing that her ability to read patients extended beyond traditional surgical training. She could interpret the subtle signs of distress in children who couldn't verbalize their discomfort, understanding when a child's behavior indicated complications that hadn't yet appeared on monitors. Michelle's nursing experience had taught her that children's play patterns often reflected their overall well-being. She convinced Dr. Vasquez to order additional testing, which revealed subtle signs of stroke, a rare but serious complication that could have permanent consequences if left untreated. The early detection allowed for immediate intervention, and David recovered completely. His parents never knew how close their son had come to permanent neurological damage, prevented only by a surgeon who understood that healing required attention to the whole child, not just the surgical site. "You saved that boy's future," Dr. Vasquez told Michelle privately. "Your ability to see beyond the obvious is exactly what pediatric surgery needs." Dr. Michelle Harris adjusted her surgical loops and reviewed the morning schedule on her tablet. 5 years had passed since completing her fellowship, and she had established herself as one of the most sought-after pediatric cardiac surgeons on the East Coast. Her reputation for handling complex congenital defects had drawn families from across the country to Children's Memorial Hospital. The morning sun streamed through her office windows as she prepared for what appeared to be a routine Tuesday. Her calendar showed 3 consultations, 2 follow-up appointments, and a surgical case review. Nothing suggested that this day would reconnect her with the man who had once tried to destroy her dreams. "Dr. Harris?" Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked softly on the door. "There's an urgent consultation request. 8-year-old boy with complex coarctation of the aorta and ventricular septal defect. The family specifically requested you." Michelle glanced at her schedule, already packed with commitments. "What's the timeline?" "The referring cardiologist says it's critical. The child's condition is deteriorating, and they need surgical intervention within the week." "Send me the chart. I'll review it and see them this afternoon." Jennifer handed her a thick medical file. The family is in consultation room 3 whenever you're ready. Michelle opened the chart, immediately absorbed in the complex cardiac anatomy described in the imaging reports. The case was challenging, exactly the type of surgery that had built her reputation. Coarctation of the aorta combined with a large ventricular septal defect required intricate repair techniques that few surgeons attempted. As she studied the echocardiogram images, one detail caught her attention: the patient's name. Tommy Hartwell. The surname triggered a distant memory, but she dismissed it as coincidence. Hartwell wasn't an uncommon name, and she had treated hundreds of children over the years. The emergency contact information made her pause. James Hartwell, CEO, MedTech Solutions. Michelle's hands went cold. The tablet trembled slightly as the full realization dawned. After 8 years, their paths were crossing again, but this time he needed her. She sat in her office for several minutes, processing the irony. The man who had dismissed her as a nurse with no future in real medicine was now seeking her expertise to save his son's life. The universe had a sense of humor that bordered on cruel. Michelle closed the chart and walked toward consultation room 3, her mind racing through the implications. Professional ethics demanded that she treat every patient with equal dedication, regardless of personal history. But the human part of her, the part that still remembered the humiliation of being escorted from his boardroom, wondered if she was strong enough to separate past wounds from present responsibilities. She paused outside the consultation room, taking a deep breath to center herself. Through the small window, she could see a man sitting beside a hospital bed, his posture radiating exhaustion and fear. This wasn't the confident executive who had once commanded a boardroom with ruthless efficiency. Michelle knocked and entered, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "Mr. Hartwell? I'm Dr. Harris." James looked up and recognition dawned slowly across his features. The color drained from his face as he processed the impossible coincidence. "Michelle Harris." "Dr. Harris," she corrected quietly, her voice steady despite the emotional earthquake occurring beneath her professional composure. They stared at each other across 8 years of accumulated hurt and transformation. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history and the weight of present circumstances. "Are you going to fix my heart?" A small voice interrupted their standoff. Michelle turned her attention to the boy in the hospital bed, and her professional instincts immediately took over. Tommy Hartwell was small for 8 years old, with a pale complexion and slight build that often accompanied complex congenital heart defects. But his eyes, intelligent and curious, reminded her instantly of his father. "I'm going to do everything I can," Michelle replied, kneeling beside the bed to meet Tommy at eye level. "Can you tell me how you've been feeling?" "Tired a lot," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "And sometimes my chest hurts when I try to run with my friends." Michelle examined Tommy's chart while maintaining conversation with him, a skill she had perfected over years of treating anxious children. "Have you been having trouble keeping up during recess?" "Yeah. I have to sit down a lot. Dad says it's because my heart needs fixing." James watched this interaction with something approaching awe. The woman he had dismissed 8 years ago was explaining complex cardiac anatomy to his son with perfect clarity and genuine compassion. Her transformation from nurse to surgeon was evident not just in her title, but in the confident way she moved through the medical environment that had once seemed foreign to her. "Tommy, your heart has 2 problems, Michelle explained, pulling up simplified diagrams on her tablet. "Think of your heart like a house with a door that doesn't close properly and a hallway that's too narrow. I'm going to fix both of those things so your heart can work much better." "Will it hurt?" Tommy asked, his bravery wavering slightly. "You'll be asleep during the surgery so you won't feel anything. When you wake up, your heart will be much stronger and you'll be able to run and play without getting tired." Tommy nodded solemnly, processing this information with the seriousness of a child who had lived with physical limitations his entire life. After Tommy was taken for additional imaging studies, Michelle and James faced each other alone in the consultation room. The air between them crackled with unresolved tension and the strange mathematics of their reversed positions. "I remember you," James said quietly, his voice lacking any trace of the arrogance that had characterized their previous encounter. 8 years ago. The monitoring system. "The one you rejected without reading," Michelle replied, her tone neutral but pointed. James ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that revealed the toll of watching his child struggle with a life-threatening condition. "Michelle, Dr. Harris, I need to apologize. You don't need to do anything except trust me with your son. But I was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong." Michelle studied his face, seeing vulnerability where arrogance had once resided. The confident executive had been replaced by a desperate father, and the transformation was as complete as her own journey from nurse to surgeon. Mr. Hartwell, whatever happened between us 8 years ago doesn't matter now. Tommy is what matters. It matters to me, James insisted. I built my career on making quick judgments, dismissing anything that didn't fit my preconceptions. I told you that you had no future in real medicine. Now you're the only person who can save my son's life. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Michelle had become exactly what James had claimed was impossible. A leader in medical innovation, respected by colleagues and trusted by families facing their worst nightmares. I became a surgeon because I wanted to save lives, Michelle said simply. Your opinion of my potential doesn't change that mission. James looked around the consultation room, taking in the diplomas on the walls, the awards recognizing Michelle's contributions to pediatric cardiac surgery, the evidence of a career built on the foundation of his rejection. How did you do it? He asked. How did you go from that day in my boardroom to this? Michelle considered the question, thinking about the years of sacrifice, the financial struggles, the moments of doubt when his words had echoed in her mind. I decided that your limitations on my potential weren't actually limitations at all. They were just your inability to see beyond your own assumptions. And now I'm going to save your son's life, not because of what you said to me 8 years ago, but despite it. The weight of that statement settled between them. James had tried to end her career in medicine, and instead had launched it toward heights he couldn't have imagined. Michelle had transformed his cruelest dismissal into her greatest motivation. Dr. Harris, James said, using her title with newfound respect, I know I have no right to ask this, but please, save my son. He's everything to me. Michelle looked at this broken man who had once seemed so powerful, understanding that parenthood had taught him lessons about vulnerability that boardrooms never could. Mr. Hartwell, I give every patient my absolute best. Tommy will receive the same level of care I would provide to my own child. As she left the consultation room, Michelle reflected on the strange journey that had brought them back together. Sometimes the people who try to destroy our dreams become the very reason we discover our true strength. The most powerful revenge isn't retaliation, it's success that speaks for itself. The pediatric cardiac surgery conference room buzzed with quiet intensity as Michelle presented Tommy's case to her surgical team. The large monitor displayed detailed imaging of his heart, a roadmap of the complex repair that lay ahead. 8-year-old male with coarctation of the aorta and large ventricular septal defect. Michelle began, her laser pointer highlighting the anatomical abnormalities. The coarctation is severe, causing significant pressure gradient across the narrowed segment. The VSD is substantial, creating left-to-right shunting that's compromising his cardiac function. Dr. Sarah, her chief resident, studied the images intently. What's your surgical approach, Dr. Harris? We'll perform the coarctation repair first through a left thoracotomy, then move to median sternotomy for the VSD closure. The timing will be critical. We need to minimize bypass time while ensuring complete repair of both defects. The team nodded, understanding the complexity of the procedure. Michelle had built her reputation on cases like this, surgeries that other centers often decline due to their technical demands and potential complications. Any concerns about the family dynamics? Asked Dr. Martinez, the anesthesiologist who had worked with Michelle for 3 years. Michelle paused, considering how much to reveal about her history with James Hartwell. The father is understandably anxious. This is Tommy's first major surgery, and the family needs extra support. What she didn't mention was the sleepless night she had spent reviewing every aspect of Tommy's case, driven by a perfectionism that went beyond professional standards. This wasn't just another surgery, it was the culmination of 8 years of proving herself worthy of the trust that James had once refused to give. In the preoperative area, Tommy sat on the hospital bed wearing cartoon-printed surgical scrubs, his legs swinging nervously. James sat beside him, trying to project calm while his own anxiety radiated through every gesture. Dr. Michelle? Tommy called out as she approached, his face brightening with recognition. Are you going to fix my heart today? That's exactly what I'm going to do, Michelle replied, pulling up a chair to sit at his eye level. Are you ready to be brave? I think so. Dad says you're the best heart doctor in the whole hospital. Michelle glanced at James, surprised by this endorsement from the man who had once questioned her basic competence. Your dad is right that I'm going to take very good care of you. Do you have any questions about what's going to happen? Tommy's expression grew serious. Will I be able to play soccer after? My friend Jake plays soccer and I want to play with him. Tommy, after your heart is fixed, you're going to be able to do things you've never been able to do before. Running, playing soccer, riding bikes, your heart will be strong enough for all of it. Promise. The word hung in the air between them, carrying weight that extended far beyond a child's simple request. Michelle looked into Tommy's trusting eyes, then at James, whose face reflected the desperate hope of a parent clinging to the promise of his child's future. I promise, Michelle said, understanding the full magnitude of that commitment. As the anesthesia team prepared Tommy for surgery, Michelle stepped aside with James for a final preoperative discussion. The waiting area was quiet, filled with the particular tension that preceded major pediatric surgery. Dr. Harris, James began, his voice strained with emotion, I need you to know something. 8 years ago, I made the worst professional judgment of my career. I let my arrogance blind me to your potential, and I've regretted it every day since. Michelle studied his face, seeing genuine remorse where smugness had once resided. Mr. Hartwell? Please let me finish. When I researched you after learning you were Tommy's surgeon, I discovered what you've accomplished. Your success rate with complex congenital repairs is extraordinary. The families you've helped, the lives you've saved, it's exactly what you told me you wanted to do 8 years ago. And I realize now that my rejection wasn't about your qualifications. It was about my inability to see beyond my own prejudices. I dismissed you because you didn't fit my narrow definition of who could innovate in medicine. Michelle absorbed his words, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness for the years of doubt his rejection had caused. Your opinion shaped my path, but it didn't define my destination. I know that now. But I also know that my son's life is in the hands of someone I once wronged terribly. I'm asking, not as a CO but as a father, please don't let my past mistakes affect how you care for Tommy. The vulnerability in his voice was complete, stripped of any pretense or corporate authority. This was simply a parent begging for his child's life. Mr. Hartwell, I took an oath to do no harm and to treat every patient with equal dedication. Tommy will receive the absolute best care I can provide, not because of our history but despite it. James nodded, tears threatening to spill over. Thank you. That's all I can ask for. In the operating room, Michelle went through her pre-surgical ritual, the same methodical preparation that had become second nature over hundreds of procedures. She reviewed Tommy's imaging one final time, visualizing each step of the complex repair ahead. Ready when you are, Dr. Harris, announced Dr. Martinez from behind his anesthesia equipment. Michelle looked down at Tommy's small form on the operating table, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision under general anesthesia. This was someone's entire world lying before her, a child whose future depended on the skills she had spent years perfecting, motivated in part by the man now sitting in the surgical waiting room. Scalpel, she said, beginning the incision that would access Tommy's heart. The surgery proceeded with the balletic precision that characterized Michelle's technique. Her hands moved with confidence born from experience, each suture placed with microscopic accuracy. The coarctation repair required delicate reconstruction of the narrowed aortic segment, while the VSD closure demanded perfect alignment to prevent residual shunting. Beautiful work, Dr. Harris, observed Dr. Chin as Michelle completed the ventricular septal defect repair. The patch placement is perfect. Michelle smiled behind her surgical mask, feeling the satisfaction that came from technical excellence applied to meaningful purpose. This wasn't just surgery, it was the fulfillment of a promise made to a trusting child and his desperate father. As Tommy's heart resumed its normal rhythm after coming off cardiopulmonary bypass, Michelle felt the familiar rush of successful completion. The monitors showed strong cardiac function, normal pressures and no residual defects. Closure looks excellent, reported the echocardiographer. No residual VSD, and the coarctation repair shows normal flow patterns. Michelle began the meticulous process of closing Tommy's chest, each layer sewn with the same attention to detail that had characterized the entire procedure. In a few hours, Tommy would wake up with a heart capable of supporting all the dreams an 8-year-old boy could imagine. In the waiting room, James sat with his head in his hands, counting the minutes until he could see his son again. He had no way of knowing that the woman he had once dismissed was at that moment giving Tommy the gift of a normal childhood, the ability to run, play, and dream without the limitations imposed by a defective heart. Sometimes our greatest mistakes become the catalysts for someone else's greatest triumphs. And sometimes, the people we underestimate become the very ones we need most. The operating room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of Tommy's heart monitor. Michelle stepped back from the surgical table, her hands steady despite the intensity of the 8-hour procedure she had just completed. The complex repair was finished. Both the coarctation and ventricular septal defect had been successfully corrected. "Excellent work, Dr. Harris," said Dr. Martinez, the anesthesiologist. His pressures looked beautiful. No gradient across the repair site. Michelle studied the monitors displaying Tommy's cardiac function. The numbers told the story of a successful surgery, but her experienced eye looked for the subtle signs that indicated true healing. Tommy's heart was beating with a strength and efficiency it had never possessed before. "Let's get him to recovery," Michelle instructed, beginning the careful process of transferring Tommy from the operating room to the pediatric cardiac intensive care unit. In the surgical waiting room, James sat with his head in his hands, counting each minute that passed. He had been there for 9 hours, watching other families receive news about their children while waiting for word about Tommy. The coffee in his cup had grown cold hours ago, forgotten in his vigil. "Mr. Hartwell?" Michelle's voice cut through his anxiety. James looked up, searching her face for any indication of the outcome. Michelle's expression was calm, professional, but he caught the hint of satisfaction in her eyes that suggested good news. "The surgery was successful," Michelle said, sitting down beside him. "Both defects have been completely repaired. Tommy's heart is working better than we dared hope." James closed his eyes, feeling 8 years of accumulated tension drain from his body. "He's okay. He's more than okay. The repair is perfect. Tommy is going to have a completely normal heart function. He'll be able to do everything other children do: run, play sports, live without any limitations." "Can I see him?" "He's being settled in the ICU now. You can see him in about 30 minutes. He'll be sedated for the rest of today, but by tomorrow morning, he should be awake and asking for you." James nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging his throat. The woman he had once dismissed as having no future in medicine had just given his son a future filled with unlimited possibilities. "Dr. Harris," he managed finally, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. This is what I do." "But James," she used his first name deliberately, "Tommy is going to need time to adjust to having a strong heart. He's lived his whole life with limitations. Learning to live without them will be its own journey." The next morning brought the moment Michelle had been anticipating. Tommy's eyes fluttered open in the ICU, his gaze immediately searching for familiar faces. James was there instantly, leaning over the bed with tears streaming down his cheeks. "Hey buddy," James whispered. "How are you feeling?" Tommy's voice was hoarse from the breathing tube, but his words were clear. "Dad? Did Dr. Michelle fix my heart?" "She did, son. She fixed it perfectly." Michelle appeared at the bedside, checking Tommy's monitors with practiced efficiency. "Good morning, Tommy. You did great during your surgery. Does this mean I can play soccer now?" Michelle smiled, remembering the promise she had made in the preoperative area. "It means your heart is strong enough for anything you want to do. But we need to let it heal first, okay? No soccer for a few weeks." "That's okay," Tommy said with the patience of a child who had waited 8 years for this moment. "I can wait a little longer." Over the next 3 days, Michelle watched Tommy's transformation with wonder. His color improved dramatically as his repaired heart delivered oxygen efficiently throughout his body. The pale, tired child who had entered the hospital was becoming an energetic boy whose eyes sparkled with newfound vitality. "Look, Dr. Michelle," Tommy called out during her evening rounds, demonstrating how he could walk the length of the ICU hallway without getting winded. "I'm not tired." "That's your new heart working perfectly," Michelle explained, checking his incision sites. "Pretty amazing, isn't it? It's the best thing ever." James watched these interactions with growing amazement. The surgeon who was caring for his son wasn't just technically excellent, she genuinely cared about Tommy as a person. Her bedside manner combined medical expertise with the kind of compassion that made children feel safe and understood. "Dr. Harris," James approached her during one of her evening visits, "I need to ask you something. How did you maintain such professionalism throughout this? Given our history, I would have understood if you had complications with treating Tommy." Michelle considered the question carefully. "James, the moment I saw Tommy's chart, I made a choice. I could let our past define how I cared for your son, or I could let my training and ethics guide me. There was never really a choice at all. But surely you felt some satisfaction? Some sense of vindication?" "I felt responsibility," Michelle replied simply. "Tommy needed the best care I could provide. Everything else was irrelevant." James shook his head in wonder. 8 years ago, I told you that you had no future in real medicine. Now you've saved my son's life with a level of skill and compassion that humbles me completely. You were wrong about my future. Michelle acknowledged. But you were also wrong about what real medicine means. It's not about credentials or titles. It's about seeing patients as whole human beings and dedicating yourself to their healing. On Tommy's final day in the hospital, he insisted on walking to the elevator under his own power. His steps were steady, his breathing unlabored, his smile radiant with the joy of a child discovering what it felt like to have a strong heart. "Dr. Michelle," he said, hugging her goodbye, "when I play my first soccer game, will you come watch?" "I wouldn't miss it," Michelle promised, meaning every word. As the elevator doors closed on Tommy and his father, Michelle reflected on the strange journey that had brought them all to this moment. Sometimes the most devastating rejections become the most powerful catalysts for transformation. And sometimes the greatest victories aren't about proving others wrong, they're about proving yourself right. The promise had been kept. Tommy would run, play, and dream without limitations. And in keeping that promise, Michelle had discovered that the most meaningful success comes not from personal vindication, but from using your gifts to change someone else's world forever. 3 weeks after Tommy's discharge, Michelle received an unexpected call during her morning surgical rounds. The voice on the other end was breathless with excitement. "Dr. Michelle. I ran around the whole playground without stopping." Tommy's voice bubbled through the phone speaker. "And I wasn't even tired." Michelle smiled, pausing her chart review to give Tommy her full attention. "That's incredible, Tommy. How did it feel?" "Like flying. Dad says I can start soccer practice next month if you say it's okay. Let's see how you're doing at your follow-up appointment next week, and then we'll talk about soccer," Michelle replied, though she already knew Tommy's recovery was exceeding all expectations. After ending the call, Michelle reflected on the transformation she had witnessed. Tommy's physical healing was remarkable, but equally impressive was watching James evolve from the arrogant executive she had encountered years ago into a devoted father whose priorities had been completely reordered by his son's illness. The following week brought Tommy's first post-operative appointment. He bounded into Michelle's office with energy that would have been impossible before surgery, his cheeks pink with health and his eyes bright with anticipation. "Dr. Michelle, look." Tommy demonstrated by running in place, his breathing steady and unlabored. "I can do this forever now." Michelle conducted her examination with growing satisfaction. Tommy's surgical sites had healed perfectly, his heart function was excellent, and his exercise tolerance was completely normal for a child his age. "Well?" James asked anxiously. "Can he start soccer?" "Tommy," Michelle said seriously, "I think you're ready for anything you want to try. Soccer, swimming, running, your heart is strong enough for all of it." Tommy's whoop of joy filled the office, and he immediately began planning his athletic future with the enthusiasm of a child who had never been able to make such plans before. After Tommy left with his father to register for soccer, Michelle found herself thinking about the broader implications of their story. One successful surgery had changed a child's life, but it had also transformed the perspective of a man whose influence extended far beyond his family. 2 days later, James requested another meeting. This time, he arrived at Michelle's office carrying a thick folder and wearing the focused expression of someone who had been working on something important. "Dr. Harris, I've been developing a proposal," he began, opening the folder to reveal detailed plans and financial projections. "I want to establish a foundation dedicated to supporting healthcare professionals from non-traditional backgrounds who want to advance their careers." Michelle studied the documents, impressed by the thoroughness of his research. "This is comprehensive. You've clearly put significant thought into this. I've spent the last month talking to nurses, physician assistants, and other healthcare workers who have innovative ideas but lack the platform or resources to implement them. The stories I've heard are remarkable, and remarkably similar to yours." James pulled out a specific section of his proposal. "I want to call it the Harris Foundation for Medical Innovation. Full scholarships for nurses pursuing medical school, research grants for developing new technologies, and mentorship programs connecting experienced physicians with healthcare professionals seeking to expand their roles." "Why use my name?" "Because you represent everything this foundation should stand for. You took an idea that could save lives, faced rejection based on prejudice rather than merit, and then transformed yourself into someone who couldn't be dismissed. Your story needs to inspire others." Michelle considered the proposal carefully. The foundation could provide opportunities for countless healthcare professionals who faced the same barriers she had encountered. But it also represented a level of public visibility that made her uncomfortable. "James, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not sure I want to be the face of this foundation. My focus is on my patients and my surgical practice." "I understand your hesitation. But consider this, How many brilliant nurses are working in hospitals right now with ideas that could revolutionize patient care? How many are being dismissed because they don't have the right credentials or connections? The question resonated deeply with Michelle. She thought about her colleagues from St. Catherine's, about the insights and innovations that went unrecognized because they came from bedside caregivers rather than research laboratories. What would my involvement actually entail? Help design the selection criteria. Participate in mentorship programs. Share your story to inspire others. You wouldn't need to abandon your surgical practice. This would complement it. Michelle spent the next week considering James's proposal. She consulted with Dr. Vasquez, who enthusiastically supported the idea, and with colleagues who had witnessed her journey from nurse to surgeon. You have an obligation to help others follow the path you've created, Dr. Vasquez told her during one of their conversations. Your success opens doors, but only if you're willing to hold them open for others. The decision crystallized during a conversation with Maria Santos, a nurse practitioner who had been working in the pediatric ICU for 15 years. Maria had developed a protocol for early detection of sepsis in children that had dramatically reduced mortality rates in their unit. I've tried to get research funding to study this protocol in other hospitals, Maria explained during their lunch meeting. But every grant application gets rejected because I don't have a medical degree or research credentials. Your protocol has saved lives here, Michelle pointed out. The data speaks for itself. The data doesn't matter if no one will listen to it coming from a nurse practitioner. That conversation convinced Michelle to accept James's proposal. The Harris Foundation for Medical Innovation was officially established 6 months later, with an initial endowment of $5 million and a mission to identify and support healthcare professionals with innovative ideas regardless of their educational background. The foundation's first class of recipients included 12 nurses pursuing medical school, 8 physician assistants developing new treatment protocols, and 4 respiratory therapists working on ventilator innovations. Each recipient received full financial support, mentorship from established physicians, and access to research facilities. Michelle found herself energized by the mentorship aspect of the foundation's work. Working with healthcare professionals who reminded her of her younger self, she discovered that teaching and inspiring others added a new dimension to her career satisfaction. Remember, she told the first group of foundation scholars during their orientation, your non-traditional background isn't something to overcome, it's your secret weapon. You see patients and problems from perspectives that traditional medical education can't provide. The foundation's impact extended beyond individual scholarships. James used his industry connections to advocate for policy changes that recognized the value of diverse perspectives in medical innovation. Hospital systems began creating pathways for nurses and other healthcare professionals to contribute to research and development initiatives. Tommy's first soccer game took place on a crisp Saturday morning in October. Michelle kept her promise to attend, watching from the sidelines as the boy who had once been too weak to walk across a playground now ran with boundless energy across the soccer field. He's incredible, James said, standing beside her as Tommy scored his first goal. 6 months ago I thought I might lose him. Now look at him. Michelle watched Tommy celebrate with his teammates, his face radiant with joy and health. He's living the life he was always meant to have. Sometimes it just takes the right intervention at the right time. Speaking of interventions, James said, the foundation has received over 300 applications for next year's scholarships. Your story is inspiring people across the country to pursue dreams they thought were impossible. Michelle smiled, thinking about all the healthcare professionals who would soon have opportunities to transform their careers and, in turn, transform patient care. Sometimes the most devastating rejections become the most powerful catalysts for positive change. As Tommy ran toward them after the game, his face glowing with excitement and his breathing completely normal, Michelle reflected on the strange mathematics of redemption. James had tried to end her career in medicine and instead had launched it toward heights neither of them could have imagined. Now, together they were creating opportunities for others to follow similar paths of transformation. Dr. Michelle? Tommy called out, holding up his soccer ball. Did you see my goal? I saw it. You were amazing. Dad says you and him are helping other people become doctors now. Is that true? Michelle looked at James, then back at Tommy. We're helping people follow their dreams just like you're following yours. 3 months later, Michelle stood before her first class of Harris Foundation scholars in the lecture hall at Children's Memorial Hospital. 12 determined faces looked back at her. Nurses, physician assistants, and respiratory therapists who had left behind secure careers to pursue dreams that others had told them were impossible. The group represented everything the foundation stood for: Maria Santos, the nurse practitioner whose sepsis protocol had already been adopted by 6 hospitals. David Chin, a respiratory therapist developing innovative ventilator weaning techniques. Sarah Williams, an emergency room nurse whose triage algorithm could revolutionize trauma care. And 9 others whose stories echoed Michelle's own journey of transformation. Welcome to the beginning of your new lives, Michelle began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had walked this path before them. You're here because you refused to accept other people's limitations on your potential. You saw problems that needed solving and had the courage to believe you could solve them. She gestured to the hospital around them, where the sounds of healing and hope filled every corridor. Medicine isn't just about treating disease. It's about seeing the whole patient, understanding that healing happens in the connection between caregiver and patient. Your backgrounds in direct patient care aren't obstacles to overcome, they're your greatest strengths. Maria Santos raised her hand. Dr. Harris, how do you handle the doubt? The voice that says you don't belong in medical school because you're starting later than everyone else. Michelle smiled, remembering her own struggles with imposter syndrome during medical school. I learned that doubt is just fear wearing a disguise. Every time that voice whispers that you're not good enough, remember the patients whose lives you've already touched. Remember why you're here. She pulled up a slide showing statistics from the Foundation's first year. 12 scholars beginning medical school, 8 research projects funded, 4 new protocols being tested in clinical trials, and countless lives already being impacted by their innovations. But the real measure of our success isn't in these numbers, Michelle continued. It's in the children who will grow up healthier because of your work, the families who won't have to face devastating diagnoses, the healthcare system that will be transformed by your perspectives. After the lecture, Michelle walked through the pediatric cardiac surgery unit, checking on her current patients. The familiar rhythm of monitors and the quiet conversations between nurses and families reminded her why she had fought so hard to reach this point in her career. Dr. Harris? A small voice called from one of the patient rooms. Michelle looked in to see 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez, who was scheduled for surgery the following week to repair a complex congenital heart defect. Emma's case was similar to Tommy's, multiple defects that would require intricate surgical repair. Hi Emma. How are you feeling today? Scared, Emma admitted honestly. My mom says you're going to fix my heart like you fixed Tommy's. Is that true? Michelle sat beside Emma's bed, remembering a similar conversation with Tommy months earlier. I'm going to do everything I can to make your heart strong and healthy. Do you know Tommy? Emma's eyes widened. The boy who plays soccer now. My mom showed me a video of him scoring a goal. That's right. Before his surgery, Tommy couldn't run or play like other kids. Now he's one of the fastest players on his team. Will I be able to run fast too? Emma, after your surgery you're going to be amazed at what your body can do. But first, we need to help your heart, okay? As Michelle left Emma's room, she reflected on the continuity of hope that defined her work. Each child she treated carried the dreams of their families, the potential for futures unlimited by cardiac defects, the possibility of lives lived without the constraints imposed by faulty anatomy. Her phone buzzed with a text message from James. Tommy's team made it to the championship game. Saturday at 2 p.m. Hope you can make it. Michelle smiled, checking her schedule. She had been following Tommy's soccer career with the pride of someone who had played a crucial role in making it possible. His success on the field represented more than athletic achievement. It was proof that the most devastating diagnoses could be overcome with the right intervention and unwavering determination. Saturday arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for a championship soccer game. Michelle found James in the stands, his face beaming with parental pride as he watched Tommy warm up with his teammates. He's grown so much, Michelle observed, noting how Tommy had filled out since his surgery. The pale, tired child she had first met was now a robust, energetic boy whose confidence radiated from every movement. In every way, James agreed. Physically, obviously, but also emotionally. He's become a leader on his team, encouraging other kids, showing them what's possible when you don't give up. The game was intense, with both teams displaying skill and determination that belied their young ages. Tommy played with the fearless enthusiasm of someone who had learned not to take physical ability for granted. Every sprint down the field, every aggressive tackle, every moment of sustained exertion was a celebration of his repaired heart's capabilities. With 5 minutes left in the game and the score tied, Tommy found himself with the ball in front of the opposing goal. Michelle watched as he drew back his leg and sent the ball sailing into the upper corner of the net, scoring the winning goal that would give his team the championship. The celebration that followed was joyous chaos, teammates mobbing Tommy, parents cheering from the stands, coaches embracing with tears in their eyes. But Michelle's attention was drawn to Tommy's face, radiant with the pure joy of a child living without limitations. After the game, Tommy ran to the stands, still clutching the championship trophy. "Dr. Michelle, did you see my goal?" "I saw it. That was incredible, Tommy. Dad says you're helping other people become doctors now, just like you became a doctor." Michelle looked at James, then back at Tommy. "We're helping people follow their dreams, just like you followed yours to become a soccer champion." Tommy considered this seriously. "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor too. Like you. I want to help kids who have broken hearts." The statement caught Michelle off guard with its simple profundity. This child, whose life she had saved, now wanted to dedicate his future to saving others. The cycle of healing and hope would continue through another generation. "That's a wonderful dream, Tommy. And if that's what you really want, I know you'll make it happen." As the celebration continued around them, James pulled Michelle aside for a private conversation. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his voice carrying the weight of careful consideration. "The foundation is growing faster than we anticipated. We've received over 500 applications for next year's scholarships, and hospitals across the country are asking us to help them develop programs for healthcare innovation." "That's wonderful news." "It is, but it also means we need to expand our leadership structure. I want to offer you the position of Chief Medical Officer for the Foundation. It would mean reducing your surgical schedule, but you'd be able to impact thousands of healthcare professionals instead of hundreds of patients." Michelle felt the weight of the decision immediately. Surgery was her passion, her calling, the culmination of years of struggle and sacrifice. But the foundation represented something equally important: the opportunity to transform healthcare by empowering others to reach their full potential. "I need time to think about it," she said honestly. "Of course. But consider this. Every surgeon you help train, every nurse you inspire to pursue advanced education, every innovative protocol you help develop will save more lives than you could touch individually, no matter how skilled you are." That evening, Michelle sat in her office reviewing Emma Rodriguez's surgical plan for the following week. The complexity of the case required her full attention and expertise, but James's offer kept intruding on her thoughts. Dr. Vasquez knocked on her door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had something important to discuss. "I heard about James's offer," she said, settling into the chair across from Michelle's desk. "Word travels fast. It's a good offer, Michelle. The foundation is already changing lives, and with your leadership, it could transform healthcare education entirely. But surgery is what I trained for. It's what I love." Dr. Vasquez smiled. "Surgery is what you trained for, but teaching and inspiring others is what you were born for. I've watched you with residents, with the foundation scholars, with young healthcare professionals who remind you of yourself. You have a gift for seeing potential in others and helping them realize it. I can do both. Reduce my surgical schedule but continue operating." "You could. But consider this. Tommy Hartwell isn't the only child whose life you've saved. Every healthcare professional you inspire, every barrier you help remove, every dream you help someone achieve will save children you'll never meet." Michelle spent the weekend considering her options, walking through the hospital where her journey had begun as a nurse and evolved into something she could never have imagined. The pediatric cardiac surgery unit hummed with its familiar rhythm of hope and healing, but she found herself drawn to the conference room where the foundation scholars gathered for their weekly meetings. Listening to their discussions, passionate debates about treatment protocols, innovative approaches to patient care, research ideas that could revolutionize medicine, Michelle realized that her greatest impact might not come from the operations she performed, but from the opportunities she created for others. On Monday morning, she called James with her decision. "I'll take the position," she said, "but with one condition. I want to continue operating 1 day a week. I need to stay connected to patient care." "Done. When can you start?" "After I finish Emma Rodriguez's surgery this week. She deserves my full attention." Emma's surgery took place on Thursday morning, a complex 8-hour procedure that required every skill Michelle had developed over her career. As she worked to repair the child's multiple cardiac defects, she thought about all the children who would benefit from the healthcare professionals the foundation would train and inspire. The surgery was successful, and Emma's recovery proceeded smoothly. As Michelle checked on her during evening rounds, the little girl smiled with the same radiant joy that had characterized Tommy's transformation. "Dr. Michelle, when I'm all better, will I be able to dance?" "I love to dance." "Emma, you're going to dance like you never imagined possible." 6 months later, Michelle stood before an audience of 500 healthcare professionals at the Foundation's first national conference. The Harris Foundation for Medical Innovation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, with chapters in 12 states and partnerships with major medical centers across the country. 3 years ago, Michelle began her keynote address. A man told me I was just a nurse with no future in real medicine. He was wrong about my future, but he was also wrong about what real medicine means. She gestured to the audience filled with nurses, physician assistants, respiratory therapists, and other healthcare professionals who had been inspired to pursue advanced education and innovative research. Real medicine isn't about titles or credentials. It's about seeing patients as whole human beings, understanding that healing happens in the connection between caregiver and patient, and having the courage to pursue solutions even when others doubt your potential. In the back of the auditorium, James Hartwell watched with Tommy beside him. The boy was now 11, healthy and strong, his dreams of becoming a doctor growing stronger with each passing year. "Dad," Tommy whispered, "Dr. Michelle is helping so many people become doctors." "She is, son. And someday you might be one of them." Tommy smiled, his hand unconsciously moving to his chest where a small scar marked the place where his life had been saved and his future had been secured. As Michelle concluded her speech to thunderous applause, she reflected on the strange mathematics of redemption. James Hartwell had tried to end her career in medicine and instead had launched it toward heights neither of them could have imagined. Tommy's illness had brought them back together, creating opportunities for healing that extended far beyond one child's heart. The most devastating rejections had become the most powerful catalysts for transformation. And the greatest victories weren't measured in personal achievement, but in the dreams made possible for others. In the end, Michelle realized James had been right about one thing. She truly had no future in real medicine as he had understood it. But real medicine, she had discovered, was something far more expansive and meaningful than he had ever imagined. Sometimes the longest path leads exactly where you need to be. And sometimes, the people who try to limit your potential become the very ones who help you discover just how limitless you really are. What dreams have you been told are impossible? Michelle's story proves that it's never too late to rewrite your future, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise. The most powerful revenge isn't retaliation. It's success that transforms not just your own life, but the lives of countless others. Drop a comment about a time someone's doubt became your motivation. Because every story of triumph begins with someone brave enough to prove the doubters wrong. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of redemption, resilience, and the power of never giving up on your dreams. Remember, your potential has no expiration date, and your greatest setbacks might just be setups for your most meaningful comebacks. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.